Hi, today I am going to show you my techniques on how to mic and record a drum set. And I want to say that out of all my years of recording music and live engineering and playing live, drums are definitely the most difficult thing I've ran across as far as recording or even miking them up for a live show. And one thing I've discovered is that a lot of people don't think of a drum set as multiple instruments. They think of a drum set as an instrument, as they would a guitar or a bass. And that's just not the case. A drum set is multiple instruments all within the same area. Thus presents a problem. Each microphone will pick up the other instruments on the drum kit. And we're going to show you how to try to eliminate that with mic positioning, things like that. And today I'm going to use a 7-piece drum kit along with 12 microphones ranging from SM58s, SM57s, some Audio-Technica microphones, things like that. So let's get started. Set up the drum kit as though you're going to play a show or have a rehearsal. Have your drummer use the same sticks for testing the drum kit that they will be using when they record the songs. For instance, if you use a smaller, lighter stick when doing the drum check, then when you go to record the actual songs with a heavier stick, then your tracks are probably going to clip, and vice versa. Another important factor is to make sure the drums are tuned as well as they can possibly be tuned. There are tutorials on YouTube on how to do that. I must say that drums are the absolute last instrument that I learned how to tune myself. They are very difficult, so don't feel like a slacker if you can't do it. Just get on YouTube and look up how to tune a drum set. Another thing is, as the engineer, try to place the microphones so that they are not in the way of the drummer, so you don't hinder the performance, and so the drummer doesn't crush your microphones. Let's start with the toms. That includes the rack toms and the floor toms on the kit. I have a floor tom here in front of me, and I have a microphone clip with an SM57 clipped in it. You can use a microphone stand or however it is that you get this microphone to pick up this drum. We use a lot of clips here in the studio. And as you can see, or maybe you can't, but hopefully you can, I've got this microphone about a 1/4 inch from the drum head. And what that does for me is allow me to keep the gain down on the input device, such as your mixing board or your audio interface, whatever it is that you're using to get the sound into the computer. That makes this drum very, very loud, and all the surrounding instruments on the drum set not quite so loud. That's going to minimize bleed for you as much as possible with the microphone. Also make sure, again, that this is not in the way of the drummer. You don't want the drum sitting like this where the drummer is playing like this, obviously. And this is going to be about the same thing for all the rack toms as well. Make sure that that microphone is pointing directly straight down at that drum and almost right on top of the head. And you may need to test by hitting other instruments while recording other drums and see how badly they bleed through this microphone as compared to the drum itself. And different positioning, maybe a little bit out, maybe a little bit in, can reduce some of that bleed for you. The next thing we're going to go for here is the kick drum or bass drum. And I prefer to have a head on the outside of my bass drum. A lot of people prefer to have an open kick drum, and to me that just sounds very boxy. I tend to like that rock and roll, heavy metal type of tight, snappy kick. And I find that if I put something inside the kick drum, like a pillow or some kind of dampener, and put the outside head on there with a hole in it, that I get that snappy sound. This is a kick drum microphone. It's not a very expensive one. You can use the SM57 or whatever it is you have. This is Audio-Technica. Can't quite read the model, but it's what we use for a kick here in the studio. And what you want to do is place that in that hole. Make sure you don't touch the hole with the microphone stand, or you're going to have rattle every time the drummer hits the kick. What I'm going to do is put my hand in there and feel exactly where that microphone is sitting as compared to the front head. Generally, I like it to be maybe 4 to 6 inches away from the front head and just off to one side, probably the right side because of where the hole is, of the beater. And that tends to stop the clipping and catch the entire sound that the drum is making. If you put the microphone directly in front of the beater, it's going to tend to be a little too clicky and lose the low end. So a little bit off to one side of the beater and about 4 to 6 inches away from the front head should do it for you. The next thing we're going to go for here is the snare drum, and the technique is slightly different on the snare drum, and it's also pretty much dead center in the middle of the rest of the instrument, so it's kind of hard to keep the bleed out of it. You can try positioning it in different spots around the snare drum while hitting the other drums and see if they bleed through very badly. But you definitely want the snare drum to be the loudest thing coming into that microphone. And the technique for snare drums that I use, that I've come across, is to point the microphone directly at where you hit the drum most. And as you can see in the center here, it's quite worn, and that's obviously where I hit the snare drum the most. So what I want to do is point that microphone directly at that spot, getting it as close as possible without being in the way where I'm going to hit it. And a technique that a lot of engineers use is to take the drumstick and run it right alongside that microphone and adjust it to where that stick hits right here in the center, right where you're playing, at the angle the microphone is sitting at. If I were to adjust that, obviously I don't want the microphone like that. It's not touching. So I'm going to adjust it about right there, tighten it down. And through trial and error here in the studio already, we've kind of deducted that this is the best place for the snare mic to be. It tends not to pick up the hi-hat so much right here, and the hi-hat is about the loudest thing as far as bleed goes in the snare microphone. We tried it over here under the hi-hat, pointing away from it, but a lot of sound came in from the back end. So this is the best place for us, and it just so happens to be right in the middle of my first 2 rack toms, which is pretty convenient.